Long ago, between the 1872 and 1892, the Filipino liberals and students who settled in Europe developed a sense of national identity. This is the story of what they did called the propaganda movement. The propagandist Jose Rizal is the most outstanding propagandist, a physician, scholar, scientist, and a writer. Central to their cause were the literary masterpieces of Jose Rizal. He wrote two books, No Limitang Here and El Filibusterismo. These showed how things were in the Philippines. Even though the Spanish banned it, these books were read by a lot of people in the Philippines. Other important propagandists included Graciano Lopez Jena, a noted orator and pamphleteer. In 1889, Graciano Lopez Jena launched La Solidaridad, a bi-weekly newspaper in Barcelona which grew to be the main organ of the propaganda movement with audiences in both Spain and Philippines. Lastly was Marcelo del Pilar, a lawyer who advocates for social change. Del Pilar was active in the anti-friar movement in the Philippines until he was forced to flee in Spain in 1888. This is where he became the editor of La Solidaridad and took over leadership of the Filipino community in Spain.
Now, let's talk about the Circulano Hispano-Filipino. In 1882, a new organization was formed called the Circulano Hispano-Filipino. It was founded by both Filipinos and Spaniards who wanted government reform. They also started a newspaper called the Revista del Circulano Hispano-Filipino to talk about the mistreatment in the Philippines and the changes they wanted. But the newspaper did not last long because they did not have enough money or enough leaders. One of the leaders of Circulano Hispano-Filipino was Juan Atayde. He is a Spaniard from Manila. He was supported by Jose Rizal and Lopez Jaina, who also wrote for the newspaper. But there were disagreements on the policy between the older members and the younger students. Eventually, the organization fell apart even though Jose Rizal was a big supporter on the Circulano Hispano-Filipino.
On November 20, 21, and 22, in the year 1884, Rizal was involved in student demonstrations. The students rallied for Dr. Miguel Moraita's defense of the freedom of science and the teacher. Despite the peaceful intent, the demonstration turned violent, leaving many students injured. As a result of the rally, Jose Rizal was almost detained by police authorities if it hadn't been for his plan to flee with his friend Valentin Ventura.
Now, let's talk about Jose Rizal's financial problem in Spain. His family in the Philippines faced Dominican control due to high rentals on the land. Also, his family faced low harvest due to drought and locusts. As a result, Jose Rizal's allowance was sometimes late. During the day, he frequently went without eating. But despite this, he finds way to earn money by participating in competitions, which he usually wins.
After finishing his studies at the Central University of Madrid, Rizal went to France and Germany for his ophthalmology specialization. He chose this path of medicine because he wanted to cure his mother's deteriorating eye condition. But of course, he hasn't forgotten his secret mission, which is to observe European customs and lifestyles in order to one day serve his motherland. Let's dive in deeper to learn about Rizal's specialization in medicine as well as his other achievements. In November of 1885, Rizal found himself in the vibrant city of Paris. He had been there for about 4 months, immersing himself in various pursuits. Initially, he worked as an apprentice for Dr. Louis de Wecker, a prominent French ophthalmologist. Under Dr. Wecker's guidance, Rizal's knowledge in ophthalmology flourished. When not at the clinic, he enjoyed the company of friends like Juan Luna and Felix Resurrection Hidalgo, discussing art and even posing for Luna's famous painting, The Death of Cleopatra. Did you know that in Juan Luna's painting, The Death of Cleopatra, Rizal was one of the Egyptian priests? Now you know! By February 1886, Rizal's journey led him to Germany, starting in Strasbourg before settling in Heidelberg. Here, he lived among German law students, showcasing his skill in chess and immersing himself in academic pursuits. Rizal worked at the University Eye Hospital under Dr. Otto Becker, attending lectures and exploring the picturesque surroundings of Heidelberg. Rizal noticed that the German Catholics and the Protestants practiced eucharism, wherein they lived together in harmony and cordiality. Did you know that in April 1886, during springtime in Heidelberg, Rizal wrote a poem about the flowers blooming along the Neckar River. Among them, his favorite was the Forget-Me-Not. Now you know! During the summer months, Rizal sought respite in the tranquil village of Wilhelmsfield, enjoying the hospitality of Pastor Karl Ulmer. It was here that he wrote his first letter in German to Professor Ferdinand Blumentritt, initiating a significant correspondence that would span 4 years. Did you know that when Rizal sent a letter to Professor Blumentritt, he also included a book called Arithmetica, as a nod to Blumentritt's interest in Philippine languages? In response, Blumentritt sent Rizal a gift of books, marking the beginning of their long and frequent correspondence. Now you know! In Leipzig, Rizal continued his academic pursuits, attending lectures and engaging with prominent scholars like Professor Friedrich Ratzel and Dr. Hans Mayer. He also took on translation projects, bringing literary works into Filipino, and worked as a proofreader to sustain himself financially. Did you know that Rizal translated William Tell's story from German to Filipino to introduce Filipinos to the Swiss hero of the independence? He also translated Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales into Filipino. Now you know! Rizal's time in Berlin was marked by intellectual vigor and recognition. He met Dr. Fyodor Yagor, the author of Travels in the Philippines, a book Rizal admired for its keen observations in the Philippine setting. In turn, Dr. Yagor introduced Rizal to Dr. Rodolph Virchow and his son, Dr. Hans Virchow. Rizal worked in Dr. Karl Ernest Schweger's clinic, becoming the first Asian member of prestigious scientific societies in Berlin. His scholarly paper on Tagalog metrical art received acclaim, and he impressed figures like Dr. Rodolph Virchow with his insights. Did you know Rizal liked Berlin because of its scientific atmosphere and lack of racial prejudice? Now you know! Life in Berlin was not without its challenges, as Rizal faced periods of financial hardship. He worked as an assistant during the day and went to lectures at night. Yet, he maintained a disciplined routine, balancing work, study, and cultural exploration. He marveled at German customs, from festive traditions to social etiquette, and documented his observations through sketches. Did you know? Rizal admired the German Yuletide costume, in which Germans would take bushes from a pine tree and decorate them with lanterns, papers, and candies. Now you know! As we look back on Rizal's time in Europe, we see not just his intelligence, but also his determination in tough times. His experiences overseas shaped how he saw things and inspired him to work for change in the Philippines.
Hello and good day. My name is Ethan Marc M. Lapuz. Noli Me Tangere. I'm sure most of us have heard of it, or at least acquainted with it, especially during our high school days. So today, we're going to dive into the fascinating story behind the publication of this iconic novel in Philippine literature, written by none other than Jose Rizal. Picture this. It's March 21, 1887. Jose Rizal, despite his financial difficulties and declining health, releases a novel, Nole Me Tangere, which translates to Touch Me Not. Inspired by Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, Rizal felt compelled to tell the story of his homeland, the Philippines. Interestingly, Rizal wasn't alone in this endeavor. Initially proposed to be written by a group of individuals, including Pedro, Maximo, and Antonio Paterno, Graciano Lopez Jaena, and others, Rizal took the lead and continued working despite the initial collaboration falling through. Despite that, Rizal continued his work on the novel by finishing a few more chapters in Germany and finishing the rest here in the Philippines. The manuscript was successfully completed by removing some passages which include the chapter on Elias and Salome, due to financial difficulties. Now here's where it gets even more intriguing. Rizal had a friend named Maximo Viola in Berlin, and with Viola's support, they founded a printing house in Berlin where they struck a deal for the publication of 2,000 copies at the lowest rate. So this was one of the important cornerstones of the publication of Nole Me Tangere in Berlin. Just when things seemed to be falling into place, Rizal encountered yet another hurdle. The chief of police in Berlin demanded Rizal's passport, threatening deportation if he couldn't produce one within 4 days. They also accused him of being a French spy since he spoke the language, or the French language, fluently. Rizal, however, managed to convince the authorities of his innocence, telling them that he's a Filipino physician and scientist. Thus, he continued to stay in Germany to see his novel through. Finally, on March 21, 1887, Nole Me Tangere was published. Rizal's dedication to his homeland shines through in every page, comparing the Philippines to a patient suffering from a deep-rooted illness. The first copies were given to his closest friends, namely Blumentritt, Dr. Antonio Jaena, Mariano Ponce, and Felix R. Hidalgo. Going back to Maximo Viola, Rizal gave Viola the proofs of Nole Me Tangere, carefully rolled around the pen he used in writing as a token of his appreciation and gratitude. There was also a dedication written on it, which said, "To Maximo Viola, my dear friend, the first to read and appreciate my work, Jose Rizal." His friends praised the novel for its profound truths and heartfelt messages, but Blumentritt's letter was one of the most significant of them all. He wrote, "First and foremost, accept my heartfelt congratulations to your lovely novel about customs, which piques my interest enormously. As we Germans say, your work was written with the blood of the heart, and thus the heart also speaks. I'm still reading it with great interest." And that, everyone, is the history and story of the publication of Nole Me Tangere in Berlin. Now we will go through another journey through history. We will embark on the fascinating recollection of the European adventures of the renowned Filipino nationalist and polymath, Jose Rizal. Rizal's journey begins after the publication of his novel, Nole Me Tangere. In the year 1887, Rizal finds himself in Berlin, Germany, just as his brother Pasiano sends him his monthly allowance of 1,000 pesos. With gratitude in his heart and a sense of duty, Rizal promptly repays Maximo Viola the amount he had borrowed for the publication of his novel. With some funds still in hand, Rizal shares his ambitious plan with Viola, being a journey back to Europe to continue his social-political observations. And so on May 11, 1887, they board a train from Berlin, with their first destination being Dresden, Germany. In Dresden, they immerse themselves in the cultural richness of the city. They visit Dr. Adolf Meyer, and the Museum of Arts, marveling at the beauty of the floral exposition. Their journey continues as they meet Dr. Fyodor Yagor and seek advice on their next visit to the esteemed Ferdinand Blumentritt and Rizal's friend. During Rizal's 26th birthday, they reached Geneva. He treated Dr. Viola to an expensive-looking meal, but soon they bid farewell as Dr. Viola returns to Barcelona and Rizal continues his solo adventure through Italy. In Italy, Rizal's keen eye for observation is once again ignited as he explores Turin, Milan, Venice, Florence, and Rome. The architecture of churches like St. Peter and St. Paul leaves him in awe, each structure telling its own story and history and faith. After a week of absorbing Italy's beauty, Rizal prepares for his return home. But the memories of his European travels will forever shape his perspective and fuel his passion to reform his beloved Philippines. And there you have it, a glimpse into the journey of Jose Rizal to the heart of Europe.
At this juncture, we will be delving into a significant chapter of Philippines history, focusing on the return of our national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal, from his studies in Europe. Rizal's journey between 1882 and 1887 was a pivotal period in his life, marked by various experiences and challenges. Let's explore his return home and the impact it had on our nation. Rizal's time in Europe was captivating and memorable, but his attachment to his homeland never waned. After 5 years overseas, he returned to the Philippines in August 1887, despite the fact that his life is in danger due to the uproar caused by his Nole Me Tangere. Driven by a strong desire to help his fellow countrymen and address the problems plaguing his nation, he insists on returning home. Rizal has his reasons for returning home, one of which is to operate on his mother's eyes, and another is to learn how his novel has affected the lives of Filipinos. Boarding the steamer Jimena on July 3, 1887, Rizal retraced his steps, sailing through the Suez Canal towards the Orient. Upon reaching Saigon, he transferred to the steamer Haipong, destined for Manila, where he arrived on August 5, 1887. Stepping onto Philippine soil with a smile, Rizal reunited with friends in Manila before proceeding to his hometown of Calamba. Despite the familiar sights, Rizal sensed an undercurrent of unease, a foreboding of the challenges ahead. Rizal's return also ignited controversy, particularly surrounding his novel Nole Me Tangere. Governor General Emilio Terrero's summons marked the beginning of Rizal's confrontation with authority. Despite facing accusations and threats to his life, Rizal remained steadfast in defending the truth and the intentions behind his work. The friars were enraged by Rizal's novel. A copy was sent to Father Rector Gregorio Echeverria of the University of Santo Tomas for further examination by a faculty committee. Because of its heretical, impious, and scandalous content, the committee determined that the novel was indeed against Catholic teachings. They also stated that it is anti-patriotic, seditious to public order, harmful to the Spanish government, and detrimental to the political function of Mother Spain in the Philippines. As a result, the Governor General sent the novel to the Permanent Commission of Censorship, which was made up of priests and lay people, for further investigation and verification. The findings were consistent, and it was recommended that the novel be banned from being imported, reproduced, or circulated in the Philippines. People became interested in the novel after hearing this recommendation and reading it behind closed doors. The friars, on the other hand, urged authorities to punish those found with the novel as a show of support for their call for harsh penalties against violators. Among those who supported and defended Rizal from his enemies was Reverend Vicente Garcia. He refuted Father Jose Rodriguez's claim that Rizal was an impious man, a heretic who hated religion and Spain. As a result, Father Garcia made the following statement. Jose Rizal was a graduate of Spanish universities and a recipient of scholastic honors, so he couldn't be an ignorant. Second, Jose Rizal does not criticize the Church or Spain because what he criticizes in the novel are bad Spanish officials, not Spain, and the bad corrupt friars, not the Church. Finally, the friars believe that those who have read the novel have committed a mortal sin. So, Father Rodriguez has also committed mortal sin. As tensions escalated and threats mounted, Rizal's family and allies urged him to leave for his safety. Reluctantly, Rizal bid farewell to Calamba in 1888, setting sail once again, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and unwavering commitment to his principles. Rizal's return to the Philippines marked a pivotal moment in our nation's history. His unwavering dedication to his homeland, coupled with his courage in confronting adversity, continues to inspire generations. As we reflect on his journey, let us honor his legacy by upholding the values of truth, justice, and freedom.
Good day, I am Cheza Leonariz, and today we delve into the lesser-known journeys of one of the Philippines' most iconic figures, Jose Rizal. Rizal was an enraged victim of human injustice, a disillusioned dreamer, and a frustrated reformer at the age of 27. While Rizal is widely celebrated for his writings and his first travel across Europe, his second travels hold significant insights into his life and the political landscape of his time. In February 1888, Jose Rizal embarked on his second journey. Unlike his first trip, this one was concealed in secrecy as he attempted to evade the watchful eyes of Spanish authorities. His primary destination was sailed from Manila to Hong Kong on the Zafiro on February 3, 1888, after a 6-month stay in Calamba. February 8, he arrived in the Hong Kong and stayed at the Victoria Hotel in Hong Kong. Jose Veranda, a Spaniard, was following Rizal's movements in Hong Kong at that time. He had been ordered to spy on Rizal. Rizal recorded some of his experience in his diary. The raucous Chinese New Year celebrations, which lasted from February 11th to 13th, were among them. There was a constant barrage of firecrackers, many of which he himself fired at the window of his hotel. He also saw the raucous Chinese theater, the Marathon Laureate Party, which was the world's longest meals, and the Dominican Order, which was Hong Kong's richest religious order, and the cemeteries. From Hong Kong to Japan, Rizal's visit to the land of the cherry blossoms was one of the happiest times of his life. From February 28 to April 13, 1888, he was in Japan for a month and a half. Rizal fell in love with a Japanese girl, whose beauty filled his soaring heart with joy and romance. Juan Perez Caballero, a secretary of the Spanish legation, paid Rizal a visit after his anvil in Tokyo. Rizal was mocked by children. Rizal decided to learn Japanese as a result of his circumstances. Within a few days, he was able to communicate. He studied Japanese drama, arts, music, and judo in Japan. Rizal boarded the Belgic and English steamer at Yokohama on April 13, 1888. Bound for the United States, he left Japan with a heavy heart, knowing that he and his beloved Osei-san would never see this beautiful land again. His 45-day stay in Japan was one of the happiest. Jose Rizal decided to visit the United States of America after his trip to Japan. There, he met Tetsuo Suehiro. Tetsuo Suehiro is a Japanese journalist, novelist, and human rights activist
who was forced to flee the country by the Japanese government. This person served as his companion for the duration of the journey from San Francisco to London on December 1888. They also parted ways in December 1888. On April 28, 1888, Rizal arrived in America for the first time. His arrival was marred by racial prejudice as he witnessed white Americans' discriminatory treatment of Chinese and Negroes. There was a racial prejudice which was incompatible with the principles of democracy and freedom that Americans preach but do not practice.
Hey there! Welcome back to our historical journey. I'm Bernadette Joy, and today we're delving into the fascinating European adventures of one of the Philippines' most revered figures, Dr. Jose Rizal. Join me as we explore his time in London and Paris, his scholarly pursuits, and the pivotal role he played in the pursuit of Philippine reform. So today, let's journey back to the late 1800s and talk about a remarkable man named Jose Rizal. From May 1888 to March 1889, Rizal spent his time in London. Why? Well, first, he wanted to get better at English. Second, he wanted to study this book called Morgas Successos de las Islas Filipinas in the British Museum. And third, London was his safe haven away from the Spanish rulers back in the Philippines. Rizal arrived in London on May 25, 1888, where he stayed with the lawyer Dr. Antonio Maria Regidor for a bit before moving in with the Becket family. They lived close to parks and British Museum, where Rizal spent most of his time studying old books about the Philippines. And then on Sundays, he hung out at Dr. Rost's place, learning about Malay customs and languages. Dr. Rost even called him a pearl of man. And then in September 1888, Rizal went to Paris for a week to check out more history books, and then one Luna and his wife entertained him while he was in Paris. But soon he was back in London diving deep into his studies. And then in December 1888, he took a trip to Spain, meeting up with fellow reformists Marcelo H. Del Pilar and Mariano Ponce. They talked about politics and promised to work together for a change. Back in London, where he spent his Christmas Eve with the Becket family, and then Mrs. Becket gave him a book called The Life and Adventures of Valentine Vox, the ventriloquist, and guess what? Rizal became the honorary president of Asociación La Solidaridad, a group fighting for reform. He even wrote his first article called Los Agricultores Filipinos in their newspaper. Now, let's talk about La Solidaridad. La Solidaridad is a review started by Filipino folks living in Spain. Rizal wrote for it from the beginning, and while in London, he penned some more articles and even fell in love for Gertrude Becket. But all good things come to an end, because in March 1889, Rizal said goodbye to London and headed to Paris. Paris was buzzing with the Universal Exposition, and Rizal got caught up in the excitement. He stayed with his friend Valentin Ventura and even published his own version of the Morgas book. Plus, he started a secret society called RDLM, or Redemption de los Malayos. It's all about spreading knowledge in the Philippines and redeeming the Malay race. And then, during his European adventure, Rizal wrote some important works like The Indolence of Filipinos and Por Telefono as a response to Dr. Salvador for banning Nalimitang Here. He also joined the International Association of Filipinologists and continued his quest to learn more about Philippine history. In 1890, he moved to Brussels, Belgium with his friend Jose Albert, where he worked on his second novel, El Filibusterismo. Amidst his literary pursuits, Rizal received distressing news from home about his family's eviction and persecution due to the Calamba estate's conflict. By August 1890, Rizal found himself in Madrid, Spain, trying every legal means to seek justice for his family and the Calamba tenants. He faced more heartbreak as he learned of his family's eviction and the deportation of his loved ones. Despite the challenges, Rizal remained determined to fight against injustice and sought support from the Filipino colony in Madrid. And so, Rizal's journey continued, marked by his unwavering commitment to his homeland and the pursuit of justice for his people. And that, my friends, is the incredible story of Jose Rizal's time in Europe. Get ready for another chapter in the extraordinary life of Dr. Jose Rizal. I'm Bernadette Joy, and today we'll dive into the publication of his iconic novel El Filibusterismo, his time in Hong Kong, and his second homecoming. So after wrapping up his time in Brussels, Rizal embarked on a journey to Ghent on July 5, 1891. Why Ghent? Well, the printing costs for his novel El Filibusterismo were cheaper in Ghent, and Rizal was very determined to get this book published, so he pawned his jewels and received financial help from his friends like Jose Maria Basa and Valentin Ventura. With their support, Rizal managed to restart the printing of El Filibusterismo, which was dedicated to the martyred priests Don Mariano Gomez, Don Jose Burgos, and Don Jacinto Zamora, also known as Gomburza. Rizal's dedication in the first edition is notable because it became one of the reasons why he was accused when he was sentenced to death in 1896. Now, let's fast forward a bit. After the publication of El Filibusterismo, Rizal set sail for Hong Kong in November 1891. He spent about 7 months there, living a pretty good life. He established his medical clinic, practiced ophthalmology, and even prepared for constitution for a new civic society called La Liga Filipina. It was a bustling time for Rizal, as he gained prominence as a physician and enjoyed a happy family reunion during Christmas. Now, let's talk about Rizal's second homecoming. Despite protests from his family and friends, Rizal made a bold decision to return to Manila. He arrived in June in 1892, staying at the Hotel de Oriente and visiting friends around town. However, things took a turn when he was accused of having incriminating leaflets. Despite his denials and demands for an investigation, Rizal was arrested and taken to Fort Santiago. And that, my friends, marks another pivotal moment in the life of this remarkable Filipino hero. And there you have it, a glimpse into the publication of El Filibusterismo, Rizal's time in Hong Kong, and his second homecoming.